First reading debate on the electoral referendum bill, if the lights are going to stay with us. Mr Speaker, I just wanted to take a moment at the outset of my contribution just to run through the history, where we find ourselves with our current electoral system, because there can be no matter more important in our democracy than our electoral system, and I think that's fairly well accepted by all. Of course, the system we currently have, the MMP system, I'm old enough certainly to remember the previous system, although it's amazing. I know that's hard to believe, but in fact I am. But it is amazing how many people I now speak to and other members speak to who have absolutely no understanding, knowledge or even awareness of our previous electoral system, first past the post. MMP, of course, first came about through the 1986 Royal Commission into the electoral system, which led to the first indicative referendum in September 1992. At that time, New Zealand voted for a change in its electoral system. We had the significant referendum with the 1993 general election, and of course in 1996, we had our first MMP election, and as the Minister's already noted in his contribution, since that time we have now had 5 governments elected under our MMP system. Now, when MMP was first adopted by a 54 to 46 split of the population, I think the thing that's worth mentioning is that the common perception among many New Zealanders, not those in the Beltway, but the common perception among many New Zealanders was that there'd be a second referendum, that they'd get another chance to express their view, having had the opportunity to kick the tyres for a while. Now, they weren't right in that. That was never what the law said. But that certainly was a commonly held view on the streets of New Zealand. What the reality was, of course, was that that opportunity would only ever happen if this House had voted to make it so. So what we actually got instead was a review in 2001 in this House, and I'd acknowledge Peter Dunn, of course, who was as a member of that committee, deputy chair, in fact, of that committee. And in 2001, this House undertook a comprehensive review of MMP, and they were instructed by this House to work as far as possible towards unanimous decisions, or at least as close to unanimity as they could. In that committee, while they certainly agreed on a number of matters, one thing that they couldn't agree on was whether there should be a second referendum on MMP. And at that time, Sir, public opinion certainly suggests that the majority of people who didn't support there being a referendum were of that view because they felt in 2001 we hadn't had enough time. We weren't really ready yet to assess where MMP was at and whether it was the appropriate system. But, sir, it's certainly the view of the National Party, and it was part of our election promise to New Zealand, that if we were elected, we thought it was time for New Zealand to have a referendum on MMP. And I think I'm very proud, in fact, sir, to be part of a government that is going to give New Zealand a chance to have that say. And as we've already heard in contributions this afternoon, this bill is not about what system we should have in this country. It's not a bill where we argue which is the better system. This bill, and I think this is an important point to make clear for anyone listening into this debate, this bill is simply about getting the process right so that we can ask New Zealanders what system we should have. And I think, sir, that that's important because even though Parliament is ultimately sovereign and can make decisions as it thinks fit, it's certainly my view that there are some issues that are simply too important and too fundamental for this House to exercise its power of unless we have a very clear and specific mandate from New Zealand. And I think, sir, there can be no better example of that than our electoral system. And so what we have in this bill, sir, is a process by which the people of New Zealand will be given an opportunity to say, do you want to keep the system we have or do you want to change? That's the first question in the referendum ballot. And that is the most important question, because if indeed they vote to keep the system we have, then the remaining issues around types of systems, second referendums and the like becomes null and void. What we do have in that case, as Ms Dalziel has pointed out, if there is a vote to keep MMP, then that will trigger a review of the MMP system, because we have one system of MMP, but that can certainly be adjusted. If, however, there's a vote to change, then the second question in this referendum will become all important. And that's the one where New Zealanders can indicate their preference of an alternative system. So, sir, it is a very important piece of legislation, not because of what's in it, but because it is setting up a process by which New Zealanders can make that very important decision. And I just want to end by commenting on the timing, because I know there has been discussion around the fact that this is going to be, or potentially could be, a drawn-out process if there's a vote for change and a further referendum and then a further period for the election. So I want to comment on one thing in closing. When we had those referendums in 92 and 93 the first time round, the 92 referenda, thank you Mr Mallard, the 92 referenda, which wasn't held with a general election, only attracted just over 50% turnout. The 93 referendum held with a general election attracted well over 80%, sir. And as Ms Dalziel commented, these are important issues that we need New Zealand to engage with. This is important, and New Zealanders must engage. It must be undertaken with a good degree of understanding. That's why having it at a general election, sir, is important to make sure we really engage New Zealand in this very important process. Thank you.
Honourable Pete Hodgson.